Hey dudes, and welcome back to the Bantz. As always, I am your host, the Bantz, and here we are. We finally made it through the end of the week. I don't know about you, but this was one hell of a hectic week for me, and what better way to finish it off than with our second What's Happening in Fashion for the week, so let's just get right into it. And first up, of course, we have our headlines for the day. And in our first headline of the day, we have brands Pleasures and Chinatown Market coming together once again, although instead of a collaboration this time, they are in fact teaming up to open up their first retail location in downtown Los Angeles. And even though I'm not the biggest fan of either of these brands for the most part, although yes, I do think they have done some very decent designs here and there in the past, that's not the point of this. The point is that I do have to give both brands congratulations here. Obviously, opening up a brick and mortar is never easy, and you do have to get to a point in your brand's life to be able to be big enough to do this. So the fact that they are able to, I mean, kudos to both of them really. Although I really do gotta say, it does feel a little weird to see Chinatown Market opening up their own brick and mortar because they're already selling in Urban Outfitters. I mean, what good does this really do? It almost makes me feel like they're trying to push this, oh, we're still a small streetwear brand vibe, when obviously that's not the case. But even with my opinion aside, if you are a fan of either streetwear in general or a fan of either of these brands, next time you happen to be in LA, I would definitely check out this store. And once again, props to both you guys, and I hope this really does work out well for you. Then in our second headline of the day, we just kind of have to talk about the fall winter lookbook that Bape just released. Now, even though as a brand, Bape has definitely lost a ton of hype over the last decade or so, and God knows we've done our fair share of shit talking the brand on this channel plenty of times, as many others have done since Nigo's departure from the brand. Even so, the brand itself has never really put out a lookbook that I would consider absolutely terrible. But this here, this is a fucking abomination. Now, I'm sure most of you are at least somewhat aware of Bape, even if you're not super well versed in the brand, seeing as that it isn't as big as it used to be. But even so, most people can kind of understand that there is somewhat of a guideline to what Bape makes. It's not that they're a one-trick pony brand, but their designs tend to be a little bit on the monotonous side. And maybe because of that, sales have been dropping in the brand, and maybe because of that, the designers tried to shake things up a bit by changing up some of the designs, and holy shit did they fuck this up. Like, even if you were to take out all the motifs that normally make Bape, like the really bright and colorful camos and the ape heads and obviously their logos, like their name and their World Gone Mad details, everything like that. If you were to take all of this out and just show this off as another brand's lookbook, I would still tell you that it was fucking awful and not cohesive. And if that's the case, then why the fuck should a brand with 25 years of history now be doing something this fucking shit? Everything just feels, once again, so non-cohesive. It's all over the place. It feels like they're trying to copy and really just knock off a lot of brands in some of their embroideries and designs, and they do it in such a way that makes these pieces feel so fucking fake. And the rest of it just feels so lackluster, so lazily put together, so boring. It just makes me feel fucking sick. Just to give you some ideas of how bad this actually gets, first we have this photo right here, which makes no fucking sense to me. as far as ape heads go in this whole lookbook, there's very few, and this is one of them. And all it looks like they did is take that ape head, go into fucking word art and Microsoft Word and go because it's really that fucking bad. But by far the biggest offender of all is this fucking t-shirt right here. What the fuck is this, Bape? You really put emojis and hashtags on a fucking shirt. What the fuck are you guys doing? You know, when I reviewed the 25th anniversary collection for Bape like a month ago, I said in a somewhat half-joking, somewhat worrying state that that collection was the final nail in the coffin for Bape. I was wrong. This one is. And if Bape really continues on this trend here, then Bape is dead. Bape is officially fucking dead. And unfortunately, ending on that note, let's move on into our art stories for the day. And first up, National Geographic showed off their winning photos from their 2018 Travel Photography of the Year competition. And as you'd expect from them, some really wonderful photos here, both in a nature and cultural context. So if you are a fan of photography, definitely worth looking into. Then design firm Studio KCA showed off their newest sculpture in the form of a giant whale breaching out of the ocean, made out of 5 tons of plastic that was found in both the Pacific and Atlantic Ocean. And overall, really stunning piece, really shows and helps kind of open people's eyes to the environmental stress we're putting on the oceans. And if you're a fan of this and want to learn a little bit more, I'd definitely check this out. And lastly, artist Okuda San Miguel showed off some of his newest pieces from his newest exhibit currently going on in Spain, and I really love these. Once again, very bright, very colorful, and if you are a fan of figures and portraits made out of shapes, specifically polygonal in this sense, then definitely check this out as well. You will not be disappointed. Okay, and now moving into our fashion section for the day. First up, we start off with London-based brand Cang, and that's Cang with a C, showing off their newest Rise collection, and I thought it was pretty interesting overall. In my opinion, this collection kind of has 2 major design ideas in it. The first of which being this more toned down, albeit still very boundary pushing contemporary collection. And then on the other hand, we have these pieces that are much more experimental, much more, not necessarily avant-garde, but definitely have some more interesting design aesthetics in them. And starting off with the first pieces I was talking about, the much more contemporary pieces, I have to say, in all honesty, that I really enjoy them. I think they're very solid. I think the ideas are very refreshing, even for being on the more contemporary side of clothing. And even just aside from that, the little smaller details such as the materials chosen or the patterns used or the stitching effects done really make it that much more just kind of lively in my book. Then on the other hand, as far as the more experimental pieces go, I can't really say I'm the biggest of fans here. Not because I don't like the aesthetics themselves. If anything, those are the only things I really do like about these pieces, that I kind of even find inspirational about these pieces. But even so, the way they kind of happened to be laid out and designed into these pieces of apparel, it just doesn't really work in my mind. And that's not necessarily a bad thing here. I do have to admit that there are and have been many diamond in the rough companies I have talked about in the past. And obviously, as you can see here, Cang has done a very fantastic job with most of their more contemporary pieces. So I feel like if they can kind of just polish up these more experimental pieces or even just the aesthetics in the future, I really expect to see some really fantastic stuff out of them in coming seasons. Then Dashiel Brahmann showed off their Spring-Summer 2019 collection, and as surprising as it may sound, I actually really enjoy this collection. And the reason why I say that's surprising is because if you kind of just look through this lookbook once or twice, without really kind of digging into the details, it can definitely seem boring at times. And if that's how you feel about this lookbook, then I completely understand. A lot of these more monochromatic outfits tend to kind of blend in with each other after a while. And although there are some really truly amazing graphics and patterns in some of these pieces, it's only very few and far in between. And even kind of going further into it, if you look into it a little bit deeper, you tend to notice that many of the silhouettes here are pretty much uniform as well too, which really doesn't help when you go back to this idea of a lot of these outfits kind of just blending into each other. But even with all that said, I still really enjoy this lookbook. Now let me explain why. And first up, let's go back to that silhouette. Now, even though the silhouette is really kind of the same in a lot of, if not all of these pieces, it kind of comes off to me like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Because I personally really adore this silhouette. It's definitely a silhouette that I would wear pretty much continuously if I could. So seeing all these pieces having that silhouette isn't really a problem with me. Then as far as the colors in this lookbook go, yes, they aren't really bold or vibrant, which is usually something I am personally looking for out of a lookbook, but being that this is a spring-summer lookbook, these pastels mixed with the materials that they're made out of are just really amazing, especially if you live in a super hot climate like I personally do. These would make perfect sense. And even though the outfits here are all for the most part monochromatic, that's just the lookbook. Once you start mixing them up and mixing and matching different tops with different bottoms, I think you can get some really nice, really great color schemes out of some of these outfits, and it really just makes a lot of sense when you start to think about it that way. And that's not even getting started on a lot of the all over patterns, all over prints that we see in some of the later pieces in this lookbook, which, as I said before, and I have to state again, so fantastic, like so well done, just really amazing stuff overall. So I really do have to give strong kudos here to Dashiel Brahmann. Just really such a solid collection, and if you're interested in this, be on the lookout for it in the beginning of next year. I know I definitely will be. And lastly, Primitive Skateboard showed off their newest collaboration, this time with television show Rick and Morty, and overall, it's pretty solid. Hot off of their last collaboration, which if you don't remember was their Dragon Ball Z collaboration, Primitive here once again shows that as far as streetwear / skatewear brands go, they are pretty much the kings of the collaboration. We see some really solid graphics here once again, some really nice coloring on a lot of these pieces, a nice range of pieces as well, and I do have to highlight all the tie-dye tees, which I think look really good among this collection. However, unlike the Dragon Ball Z collection, I find this collection a little bit more repetitive. And what I mean is that when we look back at the Dragon Ball Z collection, you could definitely see that there were many different outfits made for many different characters, and that's not really the case here. We do see, as I said before, a lot of different pieces, but we start to see a lot of the same graphics over and over and over again, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it really doesn't give as much variety as the last collaboration did. But even so, if you are a fan of either Primitive or Rick and Morty, I would definitely get on this as soon as possible because God knows it's going to sell out. Alright, and finally, let's move on to our articles for the day. And first up, The Telegraph did a nice, somewhat interview with Jean Touitou of APC fame, and he kind of goes into a variety of different things, although he mainly talks about his brand, obviously, and a lot about social media and influencers. So if either of those things sound interesting to you, or you want to get a little bit more of his mentality on things, I would definitely give this a read. Then the Jing Daily put out a very interesting article on how luxury brands are kind of screwing up with Generation Z buyers, especially in China, and they go into a couple different reasons, such as kind of playing to the Chinese aesthetic, or kind of why and how social media is such a big influence to them, especially just being online in general, and really kind of an eye-opening article, especially if you're looking to kind of open up your business or your brand, especially to China. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, I'd give this a look. And lastly, Vogue sat down once again with the legendary designer Karl Lagerfeld, and if you enjoyed his last interview for just kind of how quirky and eccentric it was, this one is definitely much more detailed, much more down to earth, and if you do really want to kind of get more of a sense of who he is outside of the eccentricity of it all, then I definitely read this as well. Alright guys, and with that we reach the end of our second and final whip for the week. I hope you guys have enjoyed, and as always, if you guys want to read any of the articles I talked about today or see any photos I wasn't able to include, I've linked everything in the description down below. And if you are new here, then welcome to the channel. We do these what's happening in fashion videos twice a week, every Monday and Friday, plus another occasional video here and there as well. So if you're interested in any of that, feel free to subscribe. Otherwise, if you just have any questions or comments or concerns, or even just want to talk fashion in general, feel free to hit me up in the comments down below. I am really always willing to talk about fashion. And thank you guys as always for watching these videos and supporting my content. I hope you all have a fantastic weekend, and as always, until next time.